The ceiling fan in Anton's apartment clicked with every rotation, a rhythmic reminder of the heat trapped inside. He stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker against the grime-streaked glass. His space was narrow, filled with stacks of unpaid notices and the smell of reheated coffee. He paced the length of the room, 3 steps to the wall, 3 steps back. The city outside roared, but in here, only the settling of floorboards filled the air.
He turned to check the lock, and that was when he heard it. A faint scratch against the wood. Then,
a sharp, crisp sound as a heavy envelope slid across the floorboards. It stopped in the center of the room. Anton froze. No one ever knocked. No one ever delivered anything to this floor. He walked over, the wood groaning under his weight, and knelt to pick it up. The paper felt thick, expensive, and cold. He tore the seal, unfolded the sheet, and read the single line. Anton, you have inherited an oil field. He stared at the ink.
He looked at the peeling paint on his walls and the empty shelves. He whispered to the silence, I do not even own a bicycle.
The silence of the room deepened, then shattered. A low rumble vibrated through the floorboards, shaking the dust from the ceiling. Anton stood rigid, the paper trembling in his grip. Suddenly, the window frames groaned as if under immense pressure. Fine, golden grains began to pour through the gaps, sliding down the walls like water. He dropped the letter and backed away, but the floor beneath him buckled. Planks splintered, revealing not the apartment below, but a swirling, blinding expanse of amber light. The sand poured faster, thick and heavy, filling the room in seconds.
It hissed against his skin, burying his feet, then climbing to his waist. He reached for the doorframe,
but the wood turned to dust in his fingers. The gravity of the room shifted. Anton lost his footing. His weight pulled toward the center of the floor. He shouted, but the sound was swallowed by the roaring wind, now whipping through the apartment. With one final, violent tear in the air, the floor vanished entirely. He fell forward, his body caught in the center of the golden vortex, spinning into the brilliant, hot light that erased the walls, the city, and the life he had known. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. Anton hit the ground hard, his face pressing into coarse, blistering sand. He scrambled upright, spitting grit, only to find himself in a vast, featureless basin under a sun that felt too close. Before he could orient himself, a rhythmic metallic clanking echoed across the dunes. A dozen figures emerged from the heat haze, their movements stiff and purposeful. They moved in a tight circle, cutting off any path of retreat. In their center, a man stepped forward, holding a ring of twisted, rusted pipes that hummed with a low-frequency vibration. Anton backed away, his boots sinking into the loose drifts. He held his hands up, palms open, shaking his head.
I know nothing about oil. I barely understand my own electricity bill. The man ignored the protest.
He stepped into Anton's personal space, the smell of ozone radiating from his presence. With a sudden, forceful motion, he pressed the pipe crown onto Anton's head. The metal bit into his skin, cold and jagged. It began to hiss, a high-pitched, serpent-like sound that sent a jolt of static through his skull. Anton stood frozen, the heavy, biting weight of the crown anchoring him to the sand as the figures bowed in unison. The figures did not speak. They gripped his arms, their movements precise and mechanical, forcing him to march over the shifting dunes. Anton stumbled, his boots sliding. But they held him upright with relentless pressure. The sand underfoot changed texture, turning from soft powder to hard, oil-slicked earth. He looked up. The horizon was no longer empty. Massive silhouettes rose against the sky, structures of iron and steel that stretched for miles. They marched him toward the center of a clearing where the ground vibrated with a deep, rhythmic thrumming.
A giant pumpjack towered above them, its long iron arm rising and falling like the neck of a predatory bird. As Anton approached,
the machine paused its cycle, The massive steel head dipped downward, creaking as it bowed low until it hovered inches from his face.
A voice erupted from the rusted joints, a sound like gravel grinding on metal. "Baron Anton!"
Your decisions shape the desert. The sheer scale of the apparatus dwarfed him, casting a long, jagged shadow that felt like a cage. Anton felt the heat radiating from the machine, a dry, metallic warmth that made his skin crawl.
He took a step back, but the ground beneath him shuddered, as if the entire landscape were waking up to monitor his next move.
The weight of the crown tightened, pulling his head down, anchoring him to the mechanical will of the field.
The sky spun until the horizon dissolved into darkness. Anton dropped, his knees hitting the hard.
Oil-crusted ground before his consciousness flickered out. He woke to the smell of dry, stale air and the soft flapping of fabric. He was inside a tent, the walls translucent and glowing with a flickering, amber light. His head throbbed, the crown still heavy.
But the mechanical roar of the field was muted here, replaced by a low, humming vibration.
A figure coalesced in the center of the space, not made of flesh, but of shifting, radiant light. It hovered inches above the sand, its features indistinct, eyes like cold stars. Anton tried to push himself back, but his muscles felt like lead. The spirit did not move.
Yet the air in the tent grew thin and sharp. Power without wisdom destroys, the voice resonated, not in the air, but directly into his temples. Power with mindfulness transforms. The spirit circled him,
a trail of sparks falling from its form to the sand. Anton sat up, his breath hitching, eyes darting toward the exit. "I am not a leader,"
he stammered, his voice thin against the silence. "I am barely a functioning adult." The spirit ignored the plea,
drawing a precise, glowing triangle into the dust at Anton's feet. It labeled the corners with light, resources, decisions, and mindset. The room felt smaller, the pressure of the spirit's expectation weighing far more than the iron crown. The tent walls vanished as the spirit vanished, leaving Anton standing at the edge of a jagged stone staircase leading deep into the earth. He descended, his boots echoing against the cold, damp rock. At the bottom, a heavy iron door swung open to reveal a circular chamber illuminated by green, flickering gaslight. 4 figures sat around a massive table carved from a single piece of dark, polished pipeline. A man composed entirely of shifting sand sat at the head, his eyes 2 hollow craters. Beside him sat a woman whose hair pulsed with a steady, orange flame, followed by a camel wearing thick, silver-rimmed glasses that magnified its dark eyes. At the far end, a robot rattled, its joints leaking a viscous, green cactus juice. They did not look at him. They stared at the table, where a map of the desert glowed with pulsing veins of oil. The Sandman gestured to an empty seat.
"Choose how to use this wealth, Baron," he commanded, his voice sounding like a landslide. Anton stood paralyzed,
his fingers gripping the heavy crown on his head. The air in the room was thick with the scent of ozone and crude oil.
He looked at the robot, then at the camel, realizing their patience was finite. The leader leaned forward,
the table vibrating under his weight. "Every second you hesitate, the desert bleeds. Decide now."
Anton stepped toward the table. His pulse hammered against his throat as the glowing map dissolved, replaced by 2 swirling, luminous spheres. The council watched in silence. The sphere on the left expanded, filling the room with the harsh,
metallic screech of grinding gears. Anton saw a desert choked by black smoke, the ground splintered by endless, frantic drilling. Machines clawed at the sand, leaving behind only craters and barren, scorched earth.
The air in the chamber turned hot and acidic. The right sphere shifted, offering a stark contrast.
It showed a desert where the same pipelines served as conduits for water and clean energy,
Small, thriving gardens sprouted near the pumpjacks, and the sky remained clear,
vibrant with light. The camel leaned forward, its glasses catching the shifting glow. Anton reached out, his hand hovering between the two realities. He felt the heat of the burning future and the cool, rhythmic pulse of the thriving one. The decision was no longer theoretical. The Sandman gestured to the table, his form shifting like a collapsing dune.
One path consumes, the figure rasped. The other sustains. Choose, Baron. Anton pulled his hand back, his knuckles white. The weight of the crown suddenly felt like a physical burden, pressing him toward the stone floor.
He stood trapped between the two spinning lights, forced to weigh the cost of his inheritance against the survival of the land. Anton turned away from the council and sprinted up the shifting slope of the highest dune. Sand sprayed beneath his boots with every desperate step. The wind clawed at his face, carrying the relentless, grinding roar of 10,000 pumpjacks. He reached the summit, his chest heaving, and looked down at the vast, mechanical landscape. The machines moved in a terrifying, synchronized rhythm, tearing at the earth as far as the horizon stretched. He braced his feet against the sliding crest, raised his hands toward the burning sky, and screamed over the din. I choose to use power for people, not for pride, not for greed. The sound of his voice did not drift. It cut through the air like a blade. Below him, the nearest pumpjack shuddered, its piston locking mid-stroke. A ripple of stillness spread outward. One by one, the iron giants halted, their gears groaning as they ceased their frantic motion. The roar that had defined the desert for centuries collapsed into an abrupt, heavy silence. Anton stood alone on the peak. The wind died down. The gears no longer shrieked. The desert, for the first time in an age, simply breathed. The silence was absolute. No pistons hissed. No gears ground against the sand. Anton remained on the summit, the air cooling against his skin as the desert heat finally began to dissipate. A soft, rhythmic hum vibrated behind him. He turned to find the glowing spirit hovering inches above the dune,
its form flickering like a dying candle. The spirit did not speak, but its light softened,
casting a gentle gold glow over the crest of the hill. Anton reached up to his temples. The metal of the crown felt cold, biting into his skin with a sharp, insistent pressure. It had pulsed with a life of its own since the moment it was placed upon him, but now it felt merely like rusted iron. He gripped the edges of the twisted pipes and pulled. The crown resisted, its serrated edges snagging his hair, before sliding free with a dry, metallic scrape. He stared at the object in his hands. It looked small, inconsequential against the backdrop of the vast, quiet desert. Without a word, he opened his fingers. The crown fell, tumbling down the slope of the dune until it buried itself deep into the shifting sand. It did not hiss. It did not move. It simply vanished, leaving Anton standing in the open, unburdened and exposed. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, turning the dunes from a deep, bruised purple to a brilliant, blinding gold. Anton stood at the peak, his silhouette sharp against the rising sun. He looked directly into the frame, his face devoid of the frantic energy that had marked his arrival. He exhaled a long, steady breath. "Life is hard," he began, his voice calm and resonant. "Power is heavy, money is loud, but your mindset is the only thing you truly control." He waited for the wind to settle. "I am not the Baron of Oil. I am the Baron of my decisions." He turned his back on the camera and began the long descent toward the valley floor. His boots crunched rhythmically against the cooling sand. He did not look back at the spot where the crown lay buried, or at the silent pumpjacks standing like monuments in the distance. He walked with a steady, measured pace, moving away from the influence of the council and the weight of the gold. The camera held its position as he grew smaller, a solitary figure crossing the vast, reclaimed expanse of the desert. The sky brightened until the horizon blurred, and the screen faded to black with the final words, "Lead your life. Don't let it lead you."